We've confused having 257 radio and 24 TV stations on our airwaves with the existence of a free and independent press in Ghana, when indeed the reality is that governments still control the media, even though the Constitution explicitly forbids this. Ghana's media has abandoned its cardinal responsibility to watch over the actions of governments on behalf of the people, and have instead fallen into bed with politicians to pursue partisan, parochial, and selfish mutual interests. More has turned out to be the same, as Ghana's airwaves have become platforms for the same diet of bland and ill-informed opinions instead of acting as beacons of enlightened education and diversity for the people. Our media has well and truly become the jungle that it was predicted to be, not because of the liberation of the airwaves, but because of the failure to pass laws to regulate and protect the independence of the media. Good evening and welcome to Tarzan's Take. The questions I want to put on the table today are: how and why have governments sabotaged the freedom and independence of the media guaranteed by our Constitution? And what impediments and dangers do these hold for both the people and the media practitioners? Why has the media voluntarily become the mouthpieces of the very politicians whose actions they are supposed to scrutinize on behalf of our people? How do we expect our people to make intelligent and informed choices from those seeking to govern in their name? Is it realistic to expect the media to seek the public interest when nearly 20 years after liberation, there are still no laws to govern media practice in Ghana? Joining me tonight to discuss these very weighty matters are Professor Kwame Karikari, the Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa and former Director General of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, and Mr. Yabuadu Ayabuafo, the President's roommate, former editor of the Daily Graphic, and former Executive Secretary of the National Media Commission. Join us after the break as we sort the wheat from the chaff to set the context for tonight's conversation.
Ghana today has more than 150 radio and TV stations, offering choice and plurality of content and opinion to the people. It has been established that more than 87% of the people get their political news, information, and education from radio and TV. Very noticeably, the state media share of the audience has dropped sharply and no longer enjoys the dominance and influence of the heady days of monotonous monopoly. For the authors of Radio I, the pioneer station that liberated Ghana's airwaves on November 19, 1994, the impetus for their action was to offer Ghanaians the opportunity to hear and access competing views about how the various political parties will turn juicy promises of manna from heaven under their rule into real and uplifting changes in their social and economic conditions. They voted into power in the 1996 elections, hence the choice of 96.2 megahertz as the Radio I broadcast frequency.
Basically, Charlie, myself, and a few others thought that we needed to test the law, which was that you're free to either set up a newspaper, radio station, TV station, whatever. The only stipulation was that there needed to be a regulator to regulate the wave bands. So we did right, and a lot of people don't know this. We did everything by the book. It wasn't a pirate station. We did right to the authorities then and stated that we wanted to get on air, and we'd chosen 96.2. Is it free? Is it available? Anyway, they never replied. We wrote to them and said that we're about to go on air. We haven't heard from you. We should assume, therefore, that everything is okay. Obviously, people didn't think we were serious, but they woke up one morning and suddenly discovered that almost all the taxis in Accra were tuned to the other station, the news station. And can you imagine what that meant? Until then, there had been no other station than the GBC.
Today, as we speak, there must be about 30 radio stations in Accra alone. nationwide there must be over 100 radio stations since 1995. A period of less than 20 years. You've had an explosion of about over 100 radio stations in the country.
Until we redemocratized in 1993, or just before we redemocratized, what we found was a media landscape that was a virtual state monopoly. And then in 1991, when the newspaper law was repealed, which was the first significant milestone, and it was even before we started our Fourth Republic, we began to see newspapers mushrooming, and so that by the time we had elections at the end of 1992, we found a lot of people, private newspapers, and they felt very comfortable publishing sometimes what we will consider scurrilous articles, but we were all quite pleased because the culture of silence had been broken.
In celebrating World Press Freedom, for me, I look at the Ghanaian media haven't come quite a long way. It was pretty rudimentary some time ago. There were just a few newspapers, hardly any electronic media. As to the internet and the new social media system, it was more or less zero. But over the years, I think we've come of age, so to speak. We now have so many newspapers, we have so many radio stations, TV stations. Some are paid television, some are free on air, and so on. So in terms of the hardware of the media, I would say we've come far. But it's the content that still, for me, remains something of a problem.
In the struggle to transition Ghana into democratic rule, especially in the closing years of the 1980s and through the early years of the Fourth Republic, Ghana's journalists showed exemplary bravery, imagination, and fearlessness in their fight to entrench and protect our freedoms and our rights. Tommy Thompson, Cabral Blair Mihe, Kofi Kumsin, Harunata, Kweku Bakon put their lives literally on the line. The immense contribution of Ghana's media to entrenching democracy was particularly felt in the first 8 years of the Fourth Republic, when the combination of deep mistrust of a dictator turned reluctant democrat, coupled with the missionary zeal to uproot the cancer which had infused and almost destroyed press freedom and its principal guardians, gave them both the incentive and the impetus to maintain the most intense of all-night vigils on their rulers. Alas, and most unfortunately, it is the very refreshing and permeating presence of the media in Ghana's democracy today that also threatens to derail the hard-won enjoyment of the very freedoms and rights that we have won for ourselves, instead of rewarding and recognizing the works and sacrifices of the pioneer freedom fighters and using these as a constant reminder and inspiration to continue in our steads. Not even the GJA has been able to do this. Ghana's media is rapidly falling into the danger of uncontrollable and arrogant collaborators of the rulers against the personal collective interests of the people. Uncontrollable and arrogant because the media believes its freedoms are unfettered and without bounds, and collaborators because its priorities are increasingly dictated by both blatant as well as unseen puppetry of the ruling political elite. As Minister of Information, current President John Mahama sought to bring sanity and decorum to the growing intolerance, abuse of people's rights, and growing use of unpolished and indecent language by suggesting that we adopt and introduce time-delay devices to monitor our broadcasting rules of engagement and operations. The object was to enable managers of broadcast media to have time to eliminate offensive and potentially libelous material before it actually goes on the airwaves. Unfortunately, Ghana's media folks saw this as an opening wedge by the government of the day to bring back censorship and control through the back door. Thus, instead of sitting down and discussing the merits or otherwise of it, the media, encouraged by opportunistic elements of the political opposition, fought tooth and nail to block all attempts by John Mahama to put the matter on the table, let alone tolerate any discussion of it.
The fact that we have various platforms, in terms of the media, print and electronic, itself is a guarantee, against monopoly of thoughts or monotony of doing things. So for me, there's nothing wrong with people having biases and prejudices and things within the context of the media.
It is a bit dangerous for a politician to own the radio station to the extent that the politician may want the ideology of his political views to be espoused. So you can imagine that being a head of that radio station, if the station or if you are seen to be pandering against the political views of the owner, without the owner even coming in to complain, you may have to sit and see whether you really want to get into a job.
In Ghana, you and I know that President Nkrumah also owned a newspaper and used it to propagate his viewpoints, and it helped him to propagate the ideals that he had. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm saying that in the end will justify the means. If politicians own the media and they are using it not to cause unnecessary divisions and strife in the country, but they are using it to educate the masses as to responsibilities and as to options that are available.
You need to be asking who, in the first place, owns these radio stations. Who? A good chunk of them are owned by politicians or people very close to centers of power, and that's disturbing. But we also need to be asking what are the tools that the state can give us to do our work. And some of it is policy, good media policy, good media laws. So it brings us to, why don't we have a right of information bill? Or why don't we have a broadcast bill that will bring sanity to the broadcast sector?
Yes, there is the perception, there is the thought, there is the belief that the ownership of media plays a certain role as in determining determining the editorial policy of the station. It happens everywhere in the world. Every media organization has its own editorial policy. But if you are a player in the industry, you must ask yourself, this obviously might be the editorial policy of the station, but is it within the accepted norms, the guidelines, the rules that governs the industry? That is what I believe in.
The issue, therefore, for me is not who owns what, but what the media is used to do. We all remember one of the biggest problems on the continent was when the media was used in Rwanda to instigate genocide. So the media ownership as such, for me, does not pose a problem. What poses a problem is what the media is used to do. We have the example in this country when there was no independent media and the state-owned media were used by governments, especially during the military regimes, to clobber citizens all over the country. But now things have changed. State ownership has now come under the control of the National Media Commission. The state cannot use the media as they used to do.
When governments changed in 2001, and Nana Akufo-Addo, responding to general public concern about the misuse and abuse in the media, especially and trampling upon the rights and reputations of many Ghanaians, sought to give legal teeth to the policing powers of the National Media Commission to oversee the media. Ghana's media has traveled into the jungle and quagmire. No law to regulate the broadcasting industry. No limit to how far FM stations can transmit. No rules as to what and when to put on as content. No control of language, accuracy, or legality of what goes out. No enforcement to constitutional rights to equal weight of accusation and rejoinder. No control on bad language or offensive behavior. No enforcement of people's rights by a seemingly cowed and blackmailed judiciary. In the aftermath of the supposed final exit of the dictator, the media forgot about its true role and purpose in a democracy, namely, to act as the guardians of the people's rights and monitors of the government's performance. Instead, Ghana's media began to crawl into bed with the political class, taking up every vociferous and partisan positions as public prosecutors and persecutors of the political opponents of their paymasters. Do you remember Komla Dumo, the boss player of Joy 99.7, and his famous tape and the 5 million cedi bribe demand made of a Lebanese businessman by a journalist? How I wish I could say the story ended with Komla Dumo's exposure and the media return to its expected role as the watchman over the actions of their rulers. Rather, it has deepened with each passing day and year of the Fourth Republic. The discourse and output of Ghana's media is dominated by loud, partisan, and also mainly hollow posturing by surrogates acting on behalf of the political classes, both the rulers and those waiting to rule.
I think, as I've always said, I prefer ugly noises to the culture of silence. So with the repeal of the criminal and seditious libel regime, so the space has become more conducive for critical thinking. We don't have the luxury of an alternative if it comes to the plurality of the media.
I think that the pluralism of many radio stations we have, it helps. But then also, you make sure that you do not allow the competition to get the good part of you. You ensure that, yes, even though you are competing, but you are competing fairly, you are playing by the rules. You do not go outside the box or the set rules. That is what I believe in.
All that a smart government needs to do is to adopt a carrot and stick strategy of threatening to throw the bucket at any roving media house if they believe they are not playing ball. That is, withdrawal of juicy advertising contract, but actually taking no specific action that may be construed as suppression of press freedom.
Going forward, we need to pass the Freedom of Information Bill so it becomes law. That would be a significant expansion of the theater for media operations. And we also need to pass the broadcasting law, which would seek to remove some of the limitations that still afflict the Ghanaian media.
I don't see how you're going to avoid the infiltration of politics into some of the media, be it radio station or TV station. But I think consumers should be the ones that dictate what survives and what doesn't survive. You know, I can say walk the talk. If we don't like a way in which a certain radio station is behaving, let's demonstrate it by just boycotting it. You know, that's the same attitude we had in setting up Radio I.
What has given oxygen to these slanted newspapers is the phenomenon which we call the newspaper review. So people publish some 500 copies of a newspaper, which really would not make you any money. But they get mileage because the messages in the newspaper, especially at the front pages, are carried by radio stations, which use them in their political discussions. And because the political discussions are so popular, most of the political class and the huge chunk of Ghanaians are hooked onto radio stations in the morning because of the political discussions. And the meat for the political discussions is the newspaper headlines. So it gives these partisan newspapers some lifeline.
Yes, it's been good. Indices always rate us highly, but there are disturbing trends as well. I mean, I was surprised that journalists in Ghana didn't protest loudly when I read in the newspapers two things. The Ministry of Information giving laptops to journalists. I think Geba did make a statement and I was very gratified. You know, it was an opportunity to ask the minister what happened to the Media Development Fund that is supposed to be created to help develop the media, because there's no question in my mind that the media has to be developed. There's no question in my mind that the media industries are too weak to be able to do the kinds of watchdog things, the kind of accountability roles they ought to be playing in a democracy.
The examples of the travails of Joy FM in the former and Oman FM in the latter should serve as a timely warning to Ghana's media that coming events cast their shadows, and that the media should take urgent steps to get out of the same bed with the political class and return to its noble role as the people's watchman.
Good. We've had a very interesting, informative, provocative commentary. But since last Friday was World Freedom Day, let's start our discussion. Professor, first of all, as Media Foundation for West Africa's director, whose main occupation is to watch the media scene, I want you to give us your perspective on the evolution of West Africa's media, our particular place in it over the last 20 or 30 odd years of world press freedom.
Thank you very much. The media landscape in Ghana, which has been described as a state monopoly before the 1990s, was really the same all over West Africa, actually in most parts of Africa. Before 1990, there were just about 4 countries where, for instance, there were other radio stations other than the state-owned radio stations. This was Liberia, for instance, during the war, and even before the war, Liberia had independent radio stations, but they were mostly evangelical radio stations. Then Radio Number 1 in Gabon, which was set up by oil companies. Apart from that, really, and then in the Gambia, there was a radio station set up onshore by a tourist company with a transmitter and the studio on a boat offshore. Apart from that, Ghana, like every other country, Kenya, wherever, South Africa, got what we are calling media pluralism in the 90s. For newspapers, there had been independent newspapers. After all, Ghana has had private newspapers since 1857. Yes, 1857.
Prof, in the context of World Press Freedom Day, which is celebrating essentially the freedom of the practitioners,
yes,
have we confused pluralism with freedom?
Or let me put it this way. The pluralism has unleashed a lot of freedom.
Yes.
However, that freedom we are talking about is expressed in ways that I think are challenging, to say the least, professionalism in media work.
Okay, let me take Yao's view. You've been a practicing journalist throughout the censorship period and the liberation period, and not just a practicing journalist, but have actually helped shape policy in the role as editor of the Graphic and Executive Secretary. How have you seen things over the last 20, 30 years in the evolution in Ghana?
Well, definitely there has been improvement. The only difficulty that we have is that the kind of things or the kind of impact that we had anticipated has not happened. It hasn't happened because primarily most of us have taken the freedom as freedom for itself, instead of using that freedom in the interests of the people. And that is the handicap. You know, so the thing is with us. And it's like we are toying with that issue because the facility is available now, and we can put it to positive change that it will make greater impact on the lives of our people. Unfortunately, because we have not understood it properly, we are not using it in the best interest of the people.
Kwame, just one last, I want to bring us back to, I think that in spite of the fact that, if you like, governments have got, exert some kind of residual control, in relation to other countries, perhaps because our governments have not been so, if you like, draconian with our press people, maybe we don't sense the danger, or maybe we are making too much fuss here about the situation.
Well, governments, in a sense, you are right.
Apart from your own experience, of course, before
yeah, well,
freedom.
Those
yes.
were different days
yes,
altogether.
Okay.
Now, I think that what is happening is that government influence is there, because it's not very easy for government now to directly dictate to even the state-owned media. But government influence is there. Perhaps it's even more there now through the private sector of the media than through the state-owned media. And this may come in so many different ways. For instance, the control of ownership of radio stations. I mean, the nature of the National Communications Authority, the structure of it, that it is headed by the Minister of Communication, makes it abundantly possible for a certain government to dole out frequencies to people whose politics they like. And that could be a very easier way of a government in power influencing the media overall than trying to dictate to the editor of the graphic or the newsrooms in GBC and so on.
Yeah, as Executive Secretary of National Media Commission, surely the Constitution and indeed the government intended that you must exercise control over the editorial and other policies. Is that realistic in a sense when government has maintained the control to allocate frequencies?
No, I mean the Constitution never wanted the Commission to exercise any control in editorial.
Manage, yeah.
Listen, I mean the question was about managing the spectrum in terms of allocation of frequency. In fact, that has been a moot point, and I mean at the Commission, it was one of the reasons why the National Media Commission refused to appoint a member to the National Communications Authority. Because our thinking at the time was that the National Media Commission was a constitutional body. The National Communications Authority is a creation of statute. So it was inferior to the Commission. And what is worse, the minister could, even if all the membership of the Commission, with all the intelligence, make any decision which is displeasing to the minister, the minister is empowered to put that thing down and veto it. So what sense does it make to waste your energy?
But that is in direct contravention of Article 163.
Well, I mean, people are arguing about it. I hold the view because the Constitution says that there shall be no impediments, including the
license. The need for a license.
And so that is the position that some of us are holding. Other people are saying that it's about, you see, the problem is that maybe our understanding of regulation, it may be what is creating the problem. Because when you regulate, it does not necessarily mean that you license. Because the regulations are provided, and anybody who understands the rules and conforms to the rules can operate. But in terms of
I don't think there's any confusion between regulation and license.
No, I'm saying that because Ghana is not unanimous on this. There are some who are steeped in their belief that the NCA is right. And there are others who are arguing that the NCA is not.
The question I was really asking you, Reid, was that the Constitution gives certain specific functions to the National Media Commission.
Yeah.
Yes.
How is the execution of those functions impeded by the politicians sequestrating the allocation of frequencies for themselves?
You know that it was a clever thing that was done by government at the time, because in the Constitution it talks about press, publications, and other media. In the law, the National Media Commissions Act, it talks about press and other publications. So it takes away other media. So in terms of the National Media Commission law, it has no authority in terms of allocating or managing the spectrum for radio. But on the other hand, it has responsibility to manage what goes on radio, and that is the dichotomy. Because if I have no interest in how the frequencies are located, how am I mandated to monitor what goes on after somebody else had given anybody, I mean,
the phrasing of those provisions in the constitutions and in the statute were because when the Constitution was drafted, there were no independent broadcasting system. So I suspect that the framers assumed that all we had and were going to have was GBC. And GBC's place was very clear in the old system.
Kwame, you know, this specific article, it derives from the 69 Constitution. It was also repeated in the 79 Constitution, and then was done in the 92.
Yeah.
Now, my specific understanding, you are the lawyer, tell me, isn't the Constitution take precedence over any law which is inconsistent? And the Constitution specifically says that there shall be no need for a license, which in any dictionary you look at talks about permission.
But what I'm saying is that there shall be no need for licensing of the press and other media.
Yes.
I'm saying that that confusion arose from the fact that historically our complaint has been the licensing of newspapers. And so the framers of the Constitution were concerned mostly, I believe, with newspapers. And because we didn't have independent electronic media, they could not conceptualize the statement.
The specific words were any medium of mass communication.
Yes.
They were very specific.
Yes.
No, that is the problem that we're dealing with. For instance, you know that under the SMC, the electronic media had been opened.
Yes.
How nobody knew that.
Our friend had done that, yes.
Yeah.
And how nobody took advantage of it until the 19... So for us, when we're talking about history of the electronic media, and you ask anybody, he will refer to the 1982 Constitution as the first time that it was liberalized. Unfortunately,
legally.
It was done so many years back.
No, let's not confuse the law with the action.
No.
Let me tell you. Let me tell you why. Because Kwame will tell you that I went to his workshop and I told him they were talking too much English and I was going to start a radio station.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is this, that because some of these things, we're talking about the average Ghanaian. Go to the streets and talk to Ghanaians and find out when was electronic media liberalized legally. They will tell you 1992 Constitution. Whereas, I mean, me and you know that SMC did that long before.
But why nobody could take advantage was simply the political atmosphere.
Yeah.
You know that under the SMC, you could not even publish independent newspapers. So how on earth would anybody even dream of establishing that? Again, it's also amazing, but not too amazing, that the Buzia regime that came after 1966 even couldn't conceive of liberalizing the airway, because globally that was not the norm, not even in Europe.
Kwame, what I'm saying is that particular provision is lifted directly from the discussions of the 1968 Constituent Assembly. The law was passed, but never tested, if you like. But anyway, I mean, after all of this, let's be practical. We have 275 authorized radio stations. 150 on the air. Are we being too fussy about the licensing and the government control if, after all, there are so many on the airwaves now? What are the dangers are we talking about? We see here.
No, we should be fussy that there is no broadcasting law, because
we'll come to that one.
Yeah, but as for the numbers, I think that the technology today makes it potentially even more explosive to have more radio stations. Take online, for instance, and with the new conversions in digital media, you can have even many more stations or channels. So the numbers are not the issue.
But no, not the number. I'm saying, do we need to fear governments if we got so many?
No, the point is that you said that we come to the law. But the law is a critical point. Because, I mean, some of the commentary that went on before we started, people were saying that it doesn't matter who owns what. But that is the danger. In the absence...
No, I want to structure the discussion, because see, what I'm hearing and I'm seeing is this. Whether it is license or permission or regulation, maybe it doesn't really matter.
It does.
But that's the point. Where does it matter?
No, it matters because between regulations and licensing, it's not the same.
Yeah.
And that's why I was saying that in a regulatory environment, we make the regulations, and every one of us conforms for as long as we conform. In a licensing regime, it depends on somebody saying that yes or no.
I understand all of that, but we have 275
No, but
authorized.
that is the problem that Prof was alluding to.
Yes.
Because who guess what is the danger.
That's exactly
That is the danger, because
very
if we want to find out who are the owners of these two something, we realize that they are very few. And that it is not that number of people. That it does not reflect the multiplicity that we are talking about.
That's exactly what I was trying to drive at. So
and
clearly,
in any case, you will not even get the information about who owns what if you try today.
You may not.
What about the dangers of what we've been witnessing recently with both the direct and indirect threats to what is perceived as an against station, on my FM, for example? There have been direct threats issued by the NCA against it.
But also the owner of that same channel
It's a political
complains that their station has been, what do they call it? Their stations has been interfered with. Their stations have been, their transmissions have been cut off. Again, I've seen a statement by the NCA saying they are not responsible. But again, it becomes difficult to say who is not responsible, because so many things about the allocation of frequencies and how the authorities do their work are not transparent.
Good.
You know, so we still need to make a fuss about the issue you are raising.
And you know, when the issue of Joy FM multimedia came, the government said they have said something, and therefore they won't cooperate with them, they won't invite them to the assignment. And that was another problem. Here is a government which is owned by all of us, deciding which station that it will invite to cover his assignment, when he has an obligation to all of us.
Fantastic.
So those of us who listen to Joy, for instance, if government blacks them out and government functions are going on, how do we assess those things? These are rare dangers.
I think it's good. But now let's move on. You see, if we look at the commentary, I hold the view that it has become too partisan. Many of the professionals that didn't seem to see, even my own founding colleague was not too worried about the issue of direct partisanship. And what's your take on it, Yao?
No, it is, you see, particularly in the absence of regulations, it is dangerous. And, you know, my friend Haruna was alluding to Rwanda, and that was precisely the problem. The problem was that the president was the biggest shareholder of that notorious radio station. And even when there was no power in the whole of the country, it was powered because it received generation from the presidency. Now, if you say that it doesn't matter, and so anybody, that can be dangerous. So in the first place, we need to have regulations. And therefore, if we have strong regulations whereby everybody is conforming to the rules, then maybe the ownership then may not be too much. But in the absence of rules, we should not toy with who owns what.
Very dangerous.
Let me get your comment, because as Director General of GBC, you are obliged to give balance. That was part of your obligation.
Yes.
A balanced coverage.
Yes.
Now,
but under what political circumstances?
I'm just saying that is an obligation steeped in the Act.
Yeah.
In the absence of regulations here, we don't have that. But my worry, especially as somebody who was in from the beginning, is that we seem to have lost the balance between partisan political talk and the need to inform the people's choices. That seemed to me a problem, but some don't seem to see it that way.
Well, again, you see, if we are talking about pluralism, then we must, and again here, the question of the law and the rules come in. If we are talking about pluralism, genuine pluralism under a democracy, then we must have a law that distinguishes between the different sectors of broadcasting. Public service, commercial, and community. Now, because I think the political class or leaderships are not interested in a true pluralism because they are able to bribe their way through mostly the commercial system, they don't care. Otherwise, the issue of balance and so on would be really, strictly speaking, the preserve of the public service. The public service would have to do activities that satisfy the broad spectrum of social, political, economic, or whatever interests. Then the community stations, which are not supposed to be commercially influenced, would also be open and above board in the communities where they are. And then the commercial stations, for as long as there are regulations, could include political stations, religious stations, or whatnot, provided that they are broadcasting according to rules that are laid down and that are transparent and that are enforced by a regulatory agency.
But are we saying, yeah, that we cannot have partisanship without informing the public? Are the two exclusive? You can have very partisan positions but still be able to inform the people's choices.
I mean, definitely they are not mutually exclusive. Yeah. The danger we have is that everything that we talk about, we take polls. We look at it from a party perspective, even when no party is required. So even the color of the water at any given time, it is because of which party, that's why it is like that.
The length of doom so is determined by the number of ministers.
Instead of looking at the quality, because whether it is this government or that government, the technical people may not necessarily change. They may change the administrative people there, but the real people who do the work are the same. You know, so sometimes we need to inform ourselves that even in the midst of politics, we can educate ourselves. But we are unwilling to do that because to do that is to give concession to the other party. And that is one of the base, you know, so that even when you are speaking independently, and once the statement that you are saying favors a certain cause, you are branded as pro-this or anti-that.
Let's just take just take 1 second, Kwame, before you come in. Listen to your roommate's take on this matter.
Radio is the most potent media vehicle, and it shapes perceptions of people. And so even more than newspapers, radio must get it right in terms of shaping our people's perceptions. And often the style that is used is very lazy. In the morning, have a talk show, a newspaper review mostly, invite representatives of political parties to come and review everything in the paper, from abortion to HIV to pilgrims to Mecca, Israel, to everything. And often these panelists are not the most knowledgeable people in society. I have seen newspaper reviews on BBC and other places. They get somebody who is, quite well, informed. And they ask, oh, what is this? And then he gives some in-depth information. It normally doesn't need to be in an adversarial style. But our simple, desire is to have people arguing and insulting each other. And when the heat in the studio reaches a tempo, then they flash it in. Adom FM. It means... Sorry, Adom. It's not only Adom that does it.
Kwame, your take on this issue of partisanship and informing the public?
Well, I'm uncomfortable with the president of the country, the leader of the NDC, making this comment. Why am I uncomfortable? The problem he is raising is precisely at the doorstep of his and other political parties. They are the ones who have organized so-called serial callers. They pay them. And these serial callers identify themselves as members of this or that political party's communication department.
Yes.
You see, so what are we hearing here? Now, because he's president, he probably needs a more balanced view in the media. But the problem comes with the politicians. All what he is talking about and all the problems, most of the problems of unprofessionalism, I will say, come from the work of politicians and political parties in their own quest for their very narrow interest of winning power by all means and for power's sake. So really, until they themselves begin to change their attitude and begin, as the president was saying, to really fight for professional media that informs the people accurately, efficiently, effectively on the programs of the government, then we are not going to go anywhere. Because
so, Mr. President, there you are. Kwame is unimpressed until you start to do something about it.
They have to.
So there's a challenge. I'm sure he'll be very happy to help you. Now, both of you have talked incessantly about laws and regulation. One of the things I would suggest is that maybe the reason why our media has not really done the job of the fourth estate is that it is blocked from getting access to information that it requires of the political process. But at the same time, it has not assisted the civil society, which has been fighting to get a broadcasting and freedom of information bill on there. What do you think a freedom of information bill will do, first of all, before we go to the other one?
Well, it will reduce the rumors. You know, President Bear is noted to have said that the truth is from above and rumors are from below. So rumors are from below, and I say that in simplistic terms. What the and the other side also is that there are many Ghanaians who have erroneously assumed that that law is for journalists. And that is a problem. And so they say about these journalists, they have too much power. Why do you give them more power? But it will help every one of us, at least.
But in the context of the media, how would it make the life easy?
It will make it a little easier to access information. Look, if you went to the police station today, any police station, you want to find out from them how many cases have been reported. If you are not lucky, you'll be locked up because you are disturbing them. And that is public information. So
you become an unreported case.
Yeah. And they will do that because they will say causing disturbance at the police station. And they will charge you. You know.
Kwame, you've been at the very heart of this fight for your freedom. But I mean, let me state for the record that both governments of both persuasions have been obfuscating about this. So tell us a little bit more about the fight. That
you see, first of all, the demand for a right to information law has been going on for about 9 years now. That's almost half of the life of the Fourth Republic as you have it. The drafts of the bill have gone through so many changes. Currently, there is something before Parliament. Now, there is a coalition of civil society organizations to which I belong. We've been working with them and with a joint committee of Parliament to work on this. The bill as it is, we have proposed a whole series of amendments to the bill, which the joint parliamentary committees agreed to, but refused in Parliament to insert them. They agreed to us in meeting, but refused to insert them. So the bill as it is now, our coalition is saying that government should not pass it as it is without the amendments proposed. If government passes the bill as it is without those amendments, Charles, I will tell you that it would be better we don't have that law than to have that law passed based on the current bill. Because if that bill is passed into law, actually we will say that the government or Parliament has passed a law to stop people's right from accessing information. It's a bad bill.
Hence your view that the political classes have colluded to stop.
The exemptions are such that, you know.
But why is Parliament, which is supposed to be independent of the executive, agreeing with you and they're not doing it right?
That is the dilemma of this thing. Because from both parties, I think both parties have been in government and out of government. And as Prof said, I've been part of the coalition for a long time. We have met them, MPs, in seminars, where they have secretly conspired with us to do this or to do that.
They fear you.
No, not the fear. They make suggestions there, but they say it will be difficult. And the biggest problem that we are facing is one of the provisions in the Constitution that does not allow independent people to make proposals for legislation in Parliament. And it must only come from the executive.
No, it doesn't allow them.
No, it does not. It limits them because it says that if in the view of the person presiding, And if you can remember, in the last parliament, where even an amendment to a law was seen as imposing a liability, and the speaker was overruling
that
to the extent that people were threatening. No, but that is the reality.
No.
We need to remove that law. We need to remove that provision from our constitution.
What it says is that you cannot make a charge on our consolidated fund.
Any law that could impose
exactly
a charge. Yes, but even the paper, the paper
it's a charge.
Wouldn't it cost money?
It's a charge.
No, I just want
the time for Parliament to discuss
I just want us to be correct in what it says and the implication. Then
you
are talking about the implication.
I was giving the meaning rather than the way, because I'm saying that anything that will be a cost to the state must have the support of the executive before you can look at that. So that is very, very limited.
We are straining to Parliament being a toothless bulldog. But
but the problem is that our Parliament since 1993 has not demonstrated any independence.
Let's bring our discussion back to the media, please.
But it is about the media also, because we need to state the fact that Parliament has played a subservient role to the executive at all times because of the possibility of somebody being appointed as a minister.
I think you see, the more interesting part of this discussion is the parliamentarians who talk from both sides of their mouths. Like, what can we do about them? Because in the context of the information bill you're talking about, it is important we expose and take action.
Maybe we need to publish the list of all MPs who have contributed for the period of the coalition in terms of some of the suggestions that they have made in plenaries and in sessions.
Please.
And publish that so that... I'm saying that it's one of the ways.
I understand what you're saying. This kind of programming, I want us to be saying, how do we remove the impediments? By all means, we say we need an information bill.
Yes.
We've seen the impediments. How do we make progress?
Well, two things I want to say. One is that I think at the base of the problem with Parliament is that we are yet possibly to have a crop of parliamentarians who have certain principles and ideals to pursue in Parliament. You see, if you have people going into Parliament just for the belly, this is what you have. But if you have people going into Parliament because they have some ideals of how to move this democracy forward, because when you move that democracy forward, eventually the belly will be full. Okay. But if people are putting the belly first before the democracy, you will not go anywhere with a kind of legislature that is not interested in expanding the frontiers of freedom. Secondly, I think that perhaps, again, we come back to the media and their professional capacity. Because to expose what parliamentarian is dozing or what parliamentarian is saying this or that for this or that bill, it's only the media who can do that kind of exposition. Right. It's not enough for people to go to Parliament and just record, like in the Hansard, who is saying what. It's important that the reporters there are so schooled that they can analyze the expressions and the contributions of MPs in Parliament for the public to learn from. You know, so until we expose these things, Parliament will never be as sharp as we want it to be.
We have 2 or 3 minutes. You both talked a lot about law. I'm very worried about the fact that FM stations are meant to be local, but you can drive as far as Konongo and Place and get things, and the content is uncontrolled. So can we sort of spend the last part of our discussion talk about what a broadcasting law would do to improve media practice and also the independence of the media? Let's start with you, Yao.
Well, you know what, the phenomenon that you are talking about is not only about that. It's about even the fact that they boast. They boast on their airwaves that we reach here, when they know that it is against the rules, you know. And
do we have any rules?
No, at least for them, in terms of the reach, at least that one the NCA has defined for them. And you know, what we need to do is the regulations that we're talking about are regulations that talk about how to package content. Not necessarily telling you what you put there, but in terms of politics, in terms of economy, in terms of culture, in terms of all those things, at least there's some level of understanding that you cannot do more of this, and that at least if you want to do, say, a radio in Accra, at least there must be guy in it. even if it is 1 hour. Yeah. If you are in,
I'm told we ran out of time, so let me give Kwame the last word on the issue of broadcasting law.
Well, I think that we need that. And I have also, and I think Yah was also involved in the coalition that has developed the broadcasting, a draft for a bill. Of course, again, the bill, that draft has gone through many changes and is currently, I think, in the Attorney General's office or the President's office before going to Parliament. And all of those provisions are there. But we must be realistic, because we know that already so many stations have gone beyond what the true regulations would require. Then there must be a certain system of reallocation, so that if you want to go beyond a certain point, you pay a certain fee. So over a period of time, we can administer it sensibly, and then after a while, maybe bring sanity to the whole map of broadcasting allocation in the country.
Thank you.
No, the only comment I wanted to make is that sometimes we must understand the parliamentary process. No. Sometimes they tell us that the thing is there, but at the end of each session, all matters lapse. And they have to be really late.
Excellent discussion, but we need to stop here. It's been a wonderful discussion by two very knowledgeable and practical practitioners.
But he cut my umbilical cord into journalism. My first journalism teacher.
I think it's time, yeah. So
he's teaching me plenty nowadays.
Viewers, fantastic. First of all, I am glad that the jungle in Ghana's media is not Tarzan's making. But clearly, from the discussion we've had tonight, it seems to us that those who rule us and those who must watch over those who rule us are, for some reason or the other, in bed to ensure that sanity does not come to our airwaves. Yes, there are many, many stations. Yes, we have pluralism. But the hidden arm of control seems to be adding to confusion to serve the interest of the politicians. You've been watching Tarzan's Take. If you have been enjoying it, thank you very much. See you again next Sunday.